Hey guys, Urban Architect here, and welcome back to City Skylines Canada. It has been a while and I'm really sorry about that, but I'm happy to say that now that exam season is done, I'll be able to dedicate a lot more time to the channel from this point onwards. So expect the summer with lots of videos, and I'm hoping that the increased quantity will be accompanied with an increase in the production quality. Anyhow, today's episode is going to be a fairly long one, and we're going to be doing a lot of the procedural object stuff that I normally do off camera, as it is pretty painful to edit. But we're going to be building 3 awesome custom metro stations, and I'm really pleased with the builds and with the video itself. So that being said, I hope you enjoy it. Now the first of the 3 stations that we're going to be working on is going to be the very modern Commonwealth Tower Station that will sit on the Green Line and will connect the city's iconic observation tower to the mass transit network of the city. The next station down the Green Line is Union Station Metro. That will be a 2-line, 4-platform station that sits half a block away from the main train station of the city and connects the Laurier tram line to the green and blue metro lines. Finally, several blocks down Victoria Avenue and on the other arm of the U-shaped blue line, the minimalist, low-profile Fraser Park Station will service the Victoria neighborhood and the big park on the headlands I've yet to build. Anyhow, let's get right into the build. So for the Commonwealth Tower Station, we're going to be doing a very modern glass station, and it's going to be put together using Senkforn's office park set, which is really one of the best sitting sets of buildings out there to work with PO. And now the rationale for this station is that it is the newest of the stations that we're building today and one of the most recent additions to the network. This station and several others were added to the pre-existing metro lines when the city hosted the Olympics for the second time in 2010. And this station was obviously a rational choice in terms of its location, as it connects the massive tourist attraction that is the Commonwealth Tower and the recently upzoned and booming condos on Elizabeth Bay to the network of the city. And these touristic motivations did give rise to the more unique aesthetic of the station, which will be the only one across the network that uses these buildings as its base. While the architecture is unique, I have still used the same platform network that I've used in Union Station, and will use in all the metro stations I build today and in the future. And as for the way the station is built, it's just 2 very thin, very short office park buildings flanking the station rails. And then at the base of those will be 4 pillars that will hold it up and will be distinguishable through their unique entrance buildings with angled pillars. I've copied those entrance buildings here and put them at the edges of the platform buildings just to add a bit more sleekness and cut down on the blockiness of the buildings. Now, as for how we're going to be naming our metro stations, the first priority for naming will be a major landmark or tourist attraction nearby, which is why the station is named for the Commonwealth Tower and not for the Elizabeth Bay neighborhood, and why it's going to be Fraser Park Station and not Victoria Station. Should the station not be located near a significant attraction, then it will be named for the district it's in, which is the case for the King Harbour and New London stations. And now right here I'm working on the elevator, which is going to be a pedestrian bridge rotated 90 degrees to be perpendicular to the ground using procedural objects, and I'm really pleased with how this looks, as it does really look like an elevator shaft and it fits in very well with the modern aesthetic of our station. Now right here I had to PO an expressway pillar into a fairly large and thin concrete slab, as the platform networks that I've used are completely invisible when viewed from below, and POing the office park also gave it a bit of a weird texture. So this will just cover up those invisible portions and give the station a more consistent underside. Now I needed to be able to connect both sides of the station to one another so that someone could get into the station through the entrance at the base of the tower and still be able to catch the downtown bound train. And I also didn't want to have to place the pathways for these connections above the rails, as that would mean having to make my buildings awkwardly tall and would really cut down on the sleekness of the station. So I've instead used the same pedestrian bridge that I used for the elevator, and I've placed them running along the base of the station. And they will be connecting the 3 entrances/exits of our station. Now there will only be 3 entrances, as 2 will be on the pillars towards the water and the third will be the one in Commonwealth Tower Park. The other corner of the intersection over which the station is located doesn't really need an entrance, as a result of being just a few meters of grass with trees right by the railway trench. And I decided to not include the footage of making the signage or placing the props for the station, as I do show off a lot of that stuff for the other stations, and I did want to keep this video fairly concise and the content within it unique. And with that being said, we're about done the first metro station of the first 3 we're building, and we're going to move a few blocks down towards Union Station Metro. Now the Union Station Metro is the only one of these stations that already had something pre-existing in its location, but the addition of the Green Line did double the amount of platforms that this station is going to need. So we definitely needed something a bit more specific to the location. And now I suppose I'll give you guys a quick overview of our 2 main metro lines, and in the future I'll probably try and make a transit map. And now both lines will be roughly U-shaped like Toronto's main metro line, and the blue line will have one arm cutting through the heart of downtown over here, and the other running along the Pacific waterfront. The base of that U will be the King Harbor Station. The Green Line, on the other hand, will be perpendicular and will serve less as a downtown line, and more in a similar role to the SkyTrain lines of Vancouver, that reach into the suburbs and are formative to the development patterns of those areas. Each arm will be on one side of the peninsula, and the base of the U will be the 2 to 4 stations where the 2 lines overlap and cut right through the heart of downtown. Anyhow, the architecture will remain very similar to the pre-existing station, and we'll still be using a now slightly taller and narrower version of the Silex office building as the main structure of the station, and it will also be the only entrance. The 4 platforms will be divided into 2 surrounding segments and an island in the middle, and will essentially hang off the back of the building. It's not really the most ideal design or really location when you see how it's pretty far from the Union Station, but I do like the concept of the metro being added to Union Station as an afterthought, as it really does fit the imagined timeline of when these various transit services would have been built. While we couldn't add elevated pathways to the Commonwealth Tower Station just because it had a profile to maintain, Union Station Metro has no such profile. So I'm going to be using this absolutely brilliant pedestrian deck set to create some elevated bridges that will allow passengers to switch lines and reach all of the platforms directly from the building. The pathways themselves will be fairly simple, with some fairly thin stairs climbing up to a covered deck. And while they may not look as modern as some of the other aspects of the transit network, these pathways do still work really well with the colors and the aesthetic themes of the station. Although not that well with the building, but I do like to believe that this station was added onto the building rather than built with it. While I was originally hoping to be able to keep the pathways entirely as props, I did end up having to use procedural objects to remove some of the more intrusive columns, and also to make the roof a bit shorter. After doing the pathways, I began the most tedious part of making this station, being placing these tiny fence props from the same set as the pathways all the way along the edges of the platforms. I did use PO to make them slightly bigger, but the reality is the only reason I was using them was to maintain a consistent aesthetic, so I couldn't really change them up too much. And of course I did cut out the majority of that boring fence placing footage, and now we'll jump from the least to the most exciting portion of this station build, the custom signage. And now I've been placing these signs all over the city, mostly off camera, but I figured that I'd show off some of the process. And this one's a template taken from the Commonwealth Tower tram station, and the signage works as follows. The big words at the top are the station name, and next to them is the arrow and the circle transit logo. That was about all I could manage within the limitations of the PO text editor. And below that, in the bottom right corner, are various icons showing which other transit lines are accessible from this stop. Then the rectangle they are set upon is colored to match the color of the line, and the text on the rectangle is the name and direction of said line. Finally, the icon to the left of the line name is what type of transit the station is, which is really unnecessary on the platform, but on street level it's good information to have. Now just to wrap up Union Station Metro, I'm placing some fairly simple props that are, just a small shelter and then some benches and garbage bins underneath it. And it's not really the most work-intensive detailing, but it's definitely some of the most important to good station design. And if you want to learn all about making realistic and well-detailed station platforms and entrances, I'd recommend you check out my tutorial on the subject. The final step to finishing off this particular station was also using some slightly modified expressway columns to support the hull structure and also to cover up the hollow bottom of the platform networks. Now on to the third and final station that we'll be doing today, and I should first preface this by letting you guys know that I've decided to convert Union Station into a terminus station, and that this new metro stop will sit on land that was formerly rails. Anyhow, Fraser Park Station will be the main metro station serving our much smaller version of Stanley Park, and also much of the Victoria district. It will be on the Blue Line and will be connected to the King Harbour Station through a tunnel that goes right through the hill within Fraser Park. Since the station itself will be in a more developed section but still within the park itself, I've gone for a very low profile style and an architecture that, while it won't entirely blend in with the park, won't be the most iconic or eye-catching portion of it. Also, I should note that it's going to be a while until I get around to building this park, as I want to work on downtown and finish it off without the performance impact of a fairly large and dense forest nearby. And now moving back to the station, it is basically the same platforms that I used in Union Station Metro, surrounding only one track this time. And I've also scrapped the overhead pathways, and passengers will instead get onto the platforms from the ground through two separate sets of stairways and elevators. These stairs and elevators will make up basically the entirety of the superstructure of the station, as once again I wanted to keep it very low key and definitely didn't want to have a very large building inside my park. Now the station is located very high off the ground, so I ended up having to place several sets of stairs, as it is at roughly the same height as the metro in King Harbour. And now I do suppose it would be fair to say that Fraser Park Station is a fairly minimalist combination of the other two stations that we've built today, with the platforms and staircases originating from Union Station Metro and the pedestrian deck set used to great effect within that build. But the small buildings I'll be using are definitely more of the same stuff, the same office park set that we used in Commonwealth Tower Station. And now I know I said I wouldn't be repeating elements of that station, but I really only used the entrances and the elevator shafts that will make up really the only non-platform, non-stairway aspects of this station. And I also added some door props by a friend of mine named Redstone that are definitely an amazing asset worth subscribing to. And with the elevator shaft done and the platform props copied over from Union Station Metro, the final order of business was fixing up the procedural object signage, and just making sure that the transit connections, which in this case are trams, buses, and taxis, were accurately represented within the signage. Anyhow, that is about all for today, and I really do hope you've enjoyed this build. And if you have, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe. Anyhow, if you want to access all of my procedural objects buildings or save games, or really just get early access to my videos or support the channel, I'd recommend you check out my Patreon. And as for the next episode of Canada, we'll either be working on some infrastructure under the bridge or building a Salesforce Center style transit hub in the heart of downtown right by First Canadian Place. I'm not really sure what should come first, but hey, we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll throw in a tutorial or looking back at another city between now and then. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.